The colony's captain, a weathered veteran named Samantha Briggs, surveyed the battered viewport of her makeshift command center. Beyond the reinforced glass, the vast, star-studded expanse of space stretched out before her, a constant reminder of both the beauty and the peril that awaited her people. Briggs had seen more than her fair share of alien incursions over the years, raiding parties of Xyrothian slavers, Silurian pirate fleets, even the occasional coalition patrol sent to remind the humans of their place. But this experimental craft, the culmination of decades of scrounged resources and brilliant engineering, represented a new hope, a chance for her people to break free of their alien oppressors once and for all. The project had been a gamble from the start, consuming precious manpower and materials that the colony could ill afford to spare. Whispers of dissent had echoed through the crowded habitats, and Briggs had weathered more than one tense confrontation with the colony's fractious council. But she had persevered, driven by an unwavering conviction that this ship, this testament to human ingenuity and determination, would be the key to their salvation. Now, as the first test firing of the vessel's experimental plasma cannons echoed through the dense lunar atmosphere, Briggs allowed herself a rare moment of triumph. The raw power of the weapons, their blue-white bolts flashing across the void, was a revelation, a glimpse of the potential that lay within this crude but formidable starship. But Briggs knew that their true test was yet to come. The Galactic Coalition, with its vast armadas and advanced technology, would not take kindly to the existence of this human warship. It was only a matter of time before their scouting parties stumbled upon the colony, and when that happened, the humans would need to be ready. Turning to her executive officer, a young woman named Alara Jansen, Briggs issued a series of terse orders. Sensors were to be monitored around the clock, long-range scanners sweeping the void for any sign of approaching coalition vessels. The prototype systems were to be put through their paces, its weapons and engines pushed to their limits in preparation for the battle to come. "We've only got one shot at this, Alara," Briggs said, her weathered face set in a determined frown. "If we can't defend ourselves against the coalition, then everything we've worked for, everything we've sacrificed for, will have been for nothing. This ship, it's our only hope. We have to make it count." Alara nodded solemnly, her eyes narrowing with a reflection of her captain's steely resolve. "We'll be ready, Samantha. I promise you that." With a curt nod, Briggs turned back to the viewport, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. In the depths of that endless void, the fate of her people hung in the balance. All they could do now was prepare, and pray that when the time came, their crude but powerful starship would be enough to turn the tide. The coalition scouting party, led by a seasoned Silurian commander named Theric, approached the human colony with a mix of caution and contempt. The Galactic Coalition had long held dominion over the stars, their advanced fleets crushing any pockets of resistance that dared to challenge their authority. The idea that these primitive humans could have constructed a functional starship was simply unthinkable. As Theric's sleek cruiser descended into the dusty atmosphere of the colony's homeworld, his sensors picked up the faint emissions of a powerful energy signature. Furrowing his brow, the Silurian commander ordered his navigator to home in on the source, his curiosity piqued. The cruiser's scanners swept across the barren landscape, cataloging the ramshackle habitats and mining facilities that dotted the surface. But then, just beyond the borders of the main settlement, a strange construct began to take shape on the display, a hulking, angular form that seemed to defy the technological limitations of the humans. "Captain, I'm detecting a power signature consistent with a large-scale weapons platform," the navigator reported, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But the design, it's unlike anything in our database." Theric's four-fingered hands gripped the arm of his command chair as he studied the readouts. The vessel before them was indeed a starship, but its architecture was crude and angular, lacking the streamlined elegance of coalition vessels. Yet the energy readings suggested a level of firepower that should have been far beyond the reach of these primitives. "Patch me through to High Command," the Silurian commander ordered, his mandibles clicking with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "I have something they need to see." Moments later, the holoprojector in the center of the bridge crackled to life, casting a shimmering image of a stern-faced Zyrothian admiral across the deck. "Report, Commander Thurok," the admiral barked, his eyes narrowing as he took in the data being transmitted from the scout ship. "Sir, we've made a most unsettling discovery," Thurok replied, his dual-toned voice tinged with a hint of unease. "The human colony on the edge of our territory appears to have constructed a crude but highly advanced starship, one capable of generating weapon signatures that rival our own cruisers." The admiral's brow ridge furrowed as he absorbed this information, his clawed fingers drumming pensively on the arm of his chair. "Impossible," he muttered, more to himself than to Thurok. "These humans are barely capable of interstellar travel, let alone building a vessel of that magnitude." "I assure you, the readings are accurate," Thurok said, his mandibles clicking anxiously. "This ship, whatever its origins, poses a clear threat to our forces in the sector. I recommend dispatching a battle group to investigate further and neutralize this anomaly." The admiral's eyes narrowed to slits as he considered the commander's words. "Very well, Thurok. Gather your squadron and proceed to the human colony's coordinates. I will dispatch a full task force to provide backup. This human warship will be eliminated, one way or another." With a curt nod, the holo image flickered and vanished, leaving Thurok and his crew alone once more on the bridge. The Exilarian commander turned to his navigator, his four-fingered hands clenching into fists. "Set a course for the colony," he growled, his dual-toned voice laced with a hint of trepidation. "And may the gods have mercy on these humans, for the Galactic Coalition will show them none." Alarms blared throughout the human colony's makeshift command center as Samantha Briggs and her crew sprang into action. The long-range sensors had detected the approaching Coalition vessels, their powerful engines cutting through the void with alarming speed. "How long until they reach firing range?" Briggs barked, her eyes narrowing as she studied the tactical display. "At their current speed, less than an hour," Alara replied, her fingers flying across the cluttered control panels. "They'd got us outmatched in both numbers and firepower. If we try to engage them directly, we won't stand a chance." Briggs's jaw tightened as she considered their options. The prototype starship, for all its destructive potential, was still woefully outclassed by the Coalition's advanced technology. A head-on assault would be suicide, and would likely result in the complete annihilation of the human colony. "We need to lure them into a trap," she murmured, her mind racing. "Something that negates their technological advantages and plays to the strengths of our ship." Alara's eyes widened with understanding. "The old mining asteroid field, the one just beyond the colony's perimeter," she said, her voice quickening with a newfound sense of urgency. "It's a maze of unstable, debris-filled passages, perfect for ambushes and hit-and-run tactics." Briggs nodded, a gleam of determination in her eyes. "Recall the prototype to the colony's docking bay. Have the crew prepare for immediate launch. I want every available weapon and defense system primed and ready to go." "What about the rest of the colony?" Alara asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "If the Coalition discovers our ruse, they could retaliate against the civilian population." "We'll have to take that risk," Briggs replied, her tone resolute. "Our only hope is to draw their full attention to the prototype and away from the colony. If we can cripple or destroy their main force, it might buy us enough time to evacuate the civilians to the mining outposts." Alara opened her mouth as if to protest, but the captain's unwavering gaze silenced her. Nodding reluctantly, she turned to relay the orders, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. As the prototype starship emerged from the colony's hangar, its powerful engines roaring to life, Briggs watched from the command center viewport. The crude, angular vessel was a far cry from the sleek, elegant warships of the Coalition, but she knew that within its battered hull lay the key to her people's survival. "Hold on, you stubborn bastards," she murmured, her eyes narrowing as the distant specks of the alien ships grew larger on the horizon. "This is our one chance. Make it count." With a deep breath, Briggs turned to her crew, her expression hardening with resolve. "Let's show these aliens what we're made of." The news of the human colony's victory against the Coalition scouting party spread like wildfire through the interstellar corridors of power. In the grand halls of the Galactic Coalition's governing body, the reverberations of this shocking defeat were felt with a palpable sense of unease. Therak, the Solarian commander whose cruiser had been crippled in the ambush, stood before the assembled council, his mandibles clicking with a mixture of shame and trepidation. As he relayed the details of the encounter, the already tense atmosphere in the chamber grew thick with a palpable tension. "Impossible," growled a hulking Zyrothian admiral, his clawed fists slamming against the ornate table. "These humans are little more than savages, barely capable of interstellar travel. How could their primitive vessel have inflicted such damage upon our forces?" The Zyrothians' outburst was met with murmurs of agreement from several of the other council members, their expressions ranging from disbelief to barely restrained fury. Therak cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention back to him. "I assure you, the readings from my ship's sensors do not lie," he said, his dual-toned voice tinged with a hint of trepidation. "This human warship possesses weaponry that rivals our own cruisers. If allowed to proliferate, it could pose a significant threat to our hegemony." A hush fell over the chamber as the council members contemplated the implications of Therak's words. For centuries, the Galactic Coalition had maintained an iron grip on the stars, their advanced technology and military might crushing any who dared to defy their rule. The very notion of a single, primitive human vessel posing a credible challenge to their power was nothing short of unthinkable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, a tall, regal-looking Solarian female rose from her seat, her piercing gaze sweeping across the assembled council members. "It is clear that we cannot allow this anomaly to persist," she said, her voice measured and authoritative. "The human colony and its experimental vessel must be eliminated before its influence can spread and inspire further acts of defiance against the Galactic Coalition." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, and soon the council was abuzz with heated discussion, each member vying to propose the most decisive course of action. In the end, it was decided that a massive coalition armada, drawn from the most elite and battle-hardened units in their fleets, would be assembled to crush the human colony once and for all. No expense would be spared, no tactic left untried, in the effort to seize the prized human starship and erase this newfound threat to the Coalition's dominance. As the council adjourned, Therak could not help but feel a twinge of trepidation. The humans had proven themselves to be far more resourceful and resilient than anyone had expected, and if the reports of their vessel's capabilities were to be believed, the coming battle could be a far more perilous endeavor than the Coalition had anticipated. With a deep, steadying breath, the Solarian commander turned and strode from the chamber, his mind already racing with strategies and contingencies. For the sake of the Galactic Coalition, he could not afford to fail. Samantha Briggs stood at the heart of the prototype starship's cramped combat bridge, her eyes scanning the tactical displays with a mixture of determination and trepidation. The distant sensors had picked up the approaching Coalition armada, their powerful engines carving a swath through the void like a pack of predators closing in on their prey. "We've got less than an hour before they're within firing range," Elara reported, her fingers flying across the control panels. "Their fleet is massive. Cruisers, destroyers, even a few dreadnoughts. We'll be hopelessly outgunned in a direct confrontation." Briggs nodded grimly, her jaw tightening with resolve. "Then we won't give them a direct confrontation," she said, her voice low and authoritative. "Set a course for the old mining asteroid field, maximum speed. We're going to lead them into a trap." Alara's eyes widened, but she nodded without hesitation, relaying the orders to the rest of the crew. The human starship's engines roared to life, the battered vessel surging forward into the void as the Coalition armada closed in behind them. As they neared the edge of the asteroid field, Briggs turned to her executive officer, a grim determination etched into her weathered features. "Alara, I need you to keep the engines running at full capacity. The moment we're deep enough into the field, I want you to cut power to the main thrusters and go to silent running. We'll need to rely on the maneuvering thrusters to navigate the asteroids." Alara's brow furrowed with concern. "But Samantha, if we cut power to the main engines, we'll be sitting ducks. The coalition ships will have us dead to rights." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Briggs replied, her eyes narrowing. "With their superior speed and firepower, they'll be overconfident. They'll think they'd got us trapped, with nowhere to run. But that's when we spring the trap." Alara's eyes widened with understanding, and she nodded sharply. "Understood, Captain. I'll make sure the crew is ready." As the human starship plunged deeper into the treacherous asteroid field, the Coalition armada surged in behind them, their sleek warships cutting through the debris with effortless grace. Theric, the Xilarian commander, stood on the bridge of his flagship, his four-fingered hands gripping the arms of his command chair with barely contained anticipation. "They've nowhere to run," he murmured, his dual-tone voice tinged with a hint of triumph. "Once we catch them in the heart of the asteroid field, we'll annihilate them and seize their precious starship. The Galactic Coalition will not be defied by these primitive humans." But even as the words left his mandibles, a growing sense of unease began to gnaw at the back of Theric's mind. The human vessel was far too calm, far too steady, as it navigated the treacherous passage ahead. And there, in the distance, something was glinting in the void, something that set the Xilarian's nerves on edge. "Helm, bring us to full stop," he barked, his eyes narrowing as he studied the sensor readings. "I want a full sweep of the asteroid field, immediately." As the Coalition armada ground to a halt, Theric's worst fears were realized. Concealed within the debris, a network of meticulously placed explosive charges had been rigged, their detonators linked to the human vessel's movements. And at the heart of this deadly trap, the prototype starship sat calmly, its weapons primed and ready to strike. Theric's mandibles clicked with a mixture of awe and dread. "By the gods," he breathed, "they've been leading us into a—" His words were cut short as the first of the charges detonated, the blinding flashes of light and the thunderous roar of explosions echoing through the void. The human starship surged forward, its battered hull weaving through the maelstrom of debris and raging fires that had once been the Coalition's vaunted armada. All around them, the sleek alien vessels were being torn apart, their sophisticated systems overwhelmed by the primal violence of the explosions. Briggs gripped the edges of the command console, her knuckles white with the strain as she shouted orders to her crew. "Target the closest cruiser, port side. Alara, get us out of this kill zone before the rest of them recover." The prototype's plasma cannons unleashed a withering barrage, the blue-white bolts lancing through the Coalition ship's weakened shields and tearing deep into its hull. Alara's skilled piloting kept the human vessel one step ahead of the enemy, darting through the treacherous asteroid field with a grace that belied its crude appearance. Theric could only watch in stunned disbelief as his flagship was crippled, its engines venting plumes of superheated plasma. The Xilarian commander had never imagined that the humans' primitive technology could outmaneuver and outgun the Coalition's finest warships, but the evidence was unfolding before his very eyes. "How is this possible?" he growled, his mandibles clicking with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Their ship should be no match for our advanced systems." One of his bridge officers, a young Xyrothian, turned to face him, her expression a blend of awe and terror. "Sir, the human vessel is utilizing the asteroid field's debris and energy discharges to confuse and overwhelm our targeting systems. Their crude but effective maneuverability is enabling them to evade our fire while delivering devastating blows in return." Theric's four-fingered hands clenched into fists as he watched his fleet crumble around him. The humans had outsmarted them, luring the Coalition's vaunted armada into a carefully prepared ambush, and then exploiting the weaknesses of their advanced technology. It was a humiliation beyond measure, one that would surely echo through the halls of power in the Galactic Coalition. "Order a full retreat," he snarled, his dual-tone voice laced with a barely restrained fury. "We cannot defeat them in these conditions. We must regroup and devise a new strategy." As the battered coalition vessels turned and fled, the human starship continued its relentless assault, its plasma cannons picking off straggling ships with ruthless efficiency. Briggs felt a sense of grim triumph swell within her chest, but she knew that the battle was far from over. "Keep us on their tail, Alara," she ordered, her eyes narrowing. "We can't let them escape to regroup. This is our chance to cripple their forces and buy us some much-needed breathing room." The prototype surged forward, its engines straining as it chased down the retreating alien vessels. Briggs knew that the Coalition would not take this defeat lightly. They would return, and in greater numbers, determined to crush the human colony and seize the prize of their experimental starship. But for now, the humans had won an unexpected victory, one that would surely send shockwaves through the very fabric of the Galactic Coalition. And Briggs would savor this moment, knowing that her people's future was no longer quite so bleak. The news of the human colony's stunning victory against the Galactic Coalition's vaunted armada spread like wildfire through the interstellar corridors of power. In the grand assembly halls of the Coalition's governing body, the reactions ranged from disbelief to outright panic. Theruk, the Xilarian commander whose flagship had been crippled in the ambush, stood before the assembled council, his mandibles clicking with a mixture of shame and trepidation. His account of the battle, of how the primitive human vessel had outmaneuvered and outgunned the Coalition's advanced warships, only served to deepen the growing sense of unease that permeated the chamber. "Impossible," growled a grizzled Xyrothian admiral, slamming his fist against the ornate table. "These humans are nothing more than savages, barely capable of interstellar travel. How could their crude technology have triumphed over the might of the Galactic Coalition?" The Xyrothian's outburst was met with a swell of murmurs and nods of agreement from the other council members. The very notion that a single primitive human vessel could pose a credible threat to their dominance was unthinkable, and yet the proof lay before them, in the form of Theruk's harrowing account. A tall, regal-looking Xilarian female rose from her seat, her piercing gaze sweeping across the assembled council. Clearly, this human colony and its experimental starship represent a grave threat to the stability of the Galactic Coalition, she said, her voice measured and authoritative. "We cannot afford to allow such an anomaly to persist, lest it inspire further acts of defiance against our rule." Nods of agreement rippled through the chamber, and soon the council was abuzz with heated discussion, each member vying to propose the most decisive course of action. In the end, it was decided that a massive coalition armada, drawn from the most elite and battle-hardened units in their fleets, would be assembled to crush the human colony and seize the prize starship. But as the council adjourned, a more pragmatic faction of the coalition leaders remained behind, their minds racing with an alternative solution to the human problem. "Clearly, brute force is not the answer," murmured a Xyrothian diplomat, her eyes narrowed in contemplation. "These humans, for all their primitive technology, have demonstrated a level of resourcefulness and innovation that we cannot simply ignore." A Thalarian scientist nodded in agreement, his brow ridges furrowing with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Indeed. Perhaps rather than seeking to destroy them, we should consider extending an offer of alliance. If we can harness their ingenuity and integrate their technology into our own, the benefits to the Galactic Coalition could be immeasurable." The Xilarian female, who had previously advocated for the human colony's destruction, raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to ripple through the room. "That is an intriguing proposition," she conceded, her expression thoughtful. "If we can convince these humans to join us, to share the secrets of their experimental starship, it could give us a significant advantage over our rivals." A hush fell over the chamber as the council members considered the implications of this new approach. The decision would not be an easy one, for it would require a fundamental shift in the coalition's long-held policy of subjugation and control. But with the threat of the human vessel looming, and the potential benefits of an alliance too great to ignore, the path forward was becoming increasingly clear. As the group dispersed, a sense of cautious optimism began to take root. Perhaps in the end, the Galactic Coalition's encounter with these unexpected human upstarts would not be a harbinger of their downfall, but rather the key to their continued dominance among the stars. The news of the human colony's stunning victory against the Galactic Coalition's vaunted armada spread like wildfire through the interstellar corridors of power. In the grand assembly halls of the Coalition's governing body, the reactions ranged from disbelief to outright panic. Therok, the Xilarian commander whose flagship had been crippled in the ambush, stood before the assembled council, his mandibles clicking with a mixture of shame and trepidation. His account of the battle, of how the primitive human vessel had outmaneuvered and outgunned the Coalition's advanced warships, only served to deepen the growing sense of unease that permeated the chamber. "Impossible," growled a grizzled Xyrothian admiral, slamming his fist against the ornate table. "These humans are nothing more than savages, barely capable of interstellar travel. How could their crude technology have triumphed over the might of the Galactic Coalition?" The Xyrothian's outburst was met with a swell of murmurs and nods of agreement from the other council members. The very notion that a single primitive human vessel could pose a credible threat to their dominance was unthinkable, and yet the proof lay before them, in the form of Therek's harrowing account. A tall, regal-looking Xilarian female rose from her seat, her piercing gaze sweeping across the assembled council. Clearly, this human colony and its experimental starship represent a grave threat to the stability of the Galactic Coalition, she said, her voice measured and authoritative. "We cannot afford to allow such an anomaly to persist, lest it inspire further acts of defiance against our rule." Nods of agreement rippled through the chamber, and soon the council was abuzz with heated discussion, each member vying to propose the most decisive course of action. In the end, it was decided that a massive coalition armada, drawn from the most elite and battle-hardened units in their fleets, would be assembled to crush the human colony and seize the prized starship. But as the council adjourned, a more pragmatic faction of the coalition leaders remained behind, their minds racing with an alternative solution to the human problem. "Clearly, brute force is not the answer," murmured a Xyrothian diplomat, her eyes narrowed in contemplation. "These humans, for all their primitive technology, have demonstrated a level of resourcefulness and innovation that we cannot simply ignore." A Thalarian scientist nodded in agreement, his brow ridges furrowing with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Indeed, perhaps rather than seeking to destroy them, we should consider extending an offer of alliance. If we can harness their ingenuity and integrate their technology into our own, the benefits to the Galactic Coalition could be immeasurable." The Xilarian female, who had previously advocated for the human colony's destruction, raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to ripple through the room. "That is an intriguing proposition," she conceded, her expression thoughtful. "If we can convince these humans to join us, to share the secrets of their experimental starship, it could give us a significant advantage over our rivals." A hush fell over the chamber as the council members considered the implications of this new approach. The decision would not be an easy one, for it would require a fundamental shift in the coalition's long-held policy of subjugation and control. But with the threat of the human vessel looming, and the potential benefits of an alliance too great to ignore, the path forward was becoming increasingly clear. As the group dispersed, a sense of cautious optimism began to take root. Perhaps in the end, the Galactic Coalition's encounter with these unexpected human upstarts would not be a harbinger of their downfall, but rather the key to their continued dominance among the stars.